Corey Ackley, Henry Steel Performance. All right, so got a little different video for us coming up here. So normally we're doing, the videos I do are comparisons on exhausts, done a ton of those, or camshafts, done some intakes, done quite a few intake comparisons. And I've even compared, 100-inch 106s and big bores as well. But we do all that, and all that work and all that testing is really about trying to achieve a level of performance. So what this video here is about is that budget build. It's that budget build. I'm going to break down the parts, how much it cost. I'm going to break down the power that it made, and then we're going to cap it off. We're going to take it to the drag strip, and there we're going to see, how did it all come together, and then really what it ended up costing. And what I will say is, if you are not looking for, well, I was going to say, if you're not looking for perfection, or if you're not looking for a show bike, you can do it pretty cheap. And I guess that's fair. Meaning that if you're more oriented on performance than you are on appearance, you can do a pretty low buck build. But if you're looking for shiny chrome or shiny powder coating and those other kind of things, then you have to buy new products, especially the ones that show exhaust and things like that. But if you're really looking at, hey man, I want to have power and I want to go, and I'm not really worried about some of the appearance aspects of it, and you can build a pretty good power plant for pretty cheap. Because there's a lot of stuff on eBay, and there's a lot of stuff that's got scratches and dings that still perform great. They just don't look good. So anyways, that's what we're doing all this for. All the videos, all the discussions and the comparisons. Again, like I told you before, this is partly selfish. This is me sharing my thoughts and my experimentations with all y'all. But it's really about how do I make my stuff faster. And I think that we've done a pretty good job at that. And so let's jump into this and let's see how it goes. All right, stand by. Okay, so here's the power the bike made. And this is from a couple months ago. Right at there, I think 119, 120 foot-pounds of torque, and somewhere right around 124, 123.5 horsepower. And I'm not going to read all the data on the bike, because we're going to go into that detail a little bit later. But that's the build there in the text box below. It gives you an idea of sort of what the bike has. So I'll give you a few moments to ponder over that. You can always pause the video if you want, and let's talk about how much this whole thing cost. All right. Like anything else, right? When we talk about budgets, here's the best I could do to recall, going back and looking through eBay purchases and things. So I remember I bought these parts over the course of several years. When I found a good deal, I bought them, and I wasn't sure why I was buying the parts, other than, they were too good. It was too good of a deal not to buy. So with that being said, the bike, as I mentioned many times before, this is my son's V92. It got wrecked a couple times, and so I bought it with a salvage title for $1,200 off of him. I got a set of 100-inch jugs off eBay for $80 that were powder coated black, but when they sent them to me, the pistons, the fins were broke off on it. So I took pictures of it, sent it back to the guy, he refunded my money. And I just JB welded them on. Again, that's not what I would recommend, but it's what I did, knowing that this was a low buck build, and they've held up fine for a couple cross country rides, hauling trailer, drag strip, you name it. But anyways, 495 SNF cams off of eBay, a used third gear custom Gen 1 version. I did buy new springs. Had a Barnett clutch and pressure plate that was given to me when I changed out a guy's clutch. I did put new 106 pistons in it, and that was dealer cost there. some road rage Basanis. I ended up only using the headers when I made my own collector and cl- merge and collector design. I did have the eSIM send off to Rob's Dyno service, have it reflashed to 7,500 RPMs and some timing added to it. And then in Power Commander 5, I got through Moto Mummy on sale for $299. So that's sort of that's the build. If you do all the math on things, it's $2,700. Now, with that said, there are other things that I've added to the gasser that does not make it any faster, but it changed how it looks. So I put some Judge handlebars on it from a 2013 Judge. It's got V92 SC wheels on it. So it's got different wheel package on there. It's got 17-inch rims. You can easier find tires, stuff like that. It does have also has a shock from a shock from a V92 SC as well. But none of those are things I added on. But if I didn't add those things, the bike would have been made just as much power. It would have been just as fast or just as slow. It doesn't make a difference. So I just want to keep that realistic when we talk about what our budgets. Yeah, there are things on there that exceeded that $2,700 I spent, but none of that was performance enhancing. It was just things that I did because I like the bike. All right, let's move on. Okay, so this is where we started from. So here's a little real quick before and after. So that bottom down there was the V92 with had a modified stock intake on there. Had I can't remember if it was stage ones or zoomies. I had so many different exhausts back here, but I think it was stage one exhaust. But anyways, that's it. The red there is how it was sort of baseline. About 90 horsepower, 90 foot-pounds of torque on it. And then that's what you have at 92 cubic inches. Then the gold is, again, same graph I saw before. That's what you get. So what I would say here, if you take the $1,200 delta out of the bike, so for $1,500, that's what I was able to achieve. Now, again, I have certain resources that I know a lot of folks don't have. But with that being said, that's still, man, bang for your buck, horsepower per dollar. Whatever way you want to skin the cat, that's 35 horsepower over where it was, and 30 foot-pounds of torque. So that's a fairly level, and I'm pleased with the outcome. And again, now what you won't see between the red and the gold is a bunch of other tests, a bunch of other exhausts, a bunch of other intakes, a bunch of other things that were all done inside of there that all impacted output. But again, that's just a dyno. What I think we all really care about is what happens when we're out there hot run with our buddies, we're going to the drag strip. That's the ultimate test. It's not some dyno graph saying, yeah, my bike made X power. It's actually, what does it put to the ground? And how do you utilize that? How can the bike utilize that? And I'll tell you, before we get into the video, the bike outperformed me. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. There you go. All right, here we go. We have a time slip here. So before I go into time slip, I asked one thing. Please watch at the end of the video. I'm going to do a small recap and give some more of my thoughts, and I'm going to talk about some other things as well. But I would just ask you to hang on if you can. All right. So for those of you who've been to the drag strip or have run your bike or run a car or something like that, you understand this. For those you haven't, this may not mean as much to you. But with that being said, All right, a couple things. I was out there and I was not trying to. This was a test and tune, so I was not racing. I wasn't trying to beat anybody. I was trying to get a good launch. So my reaction time wasn't good, and I wasn't trying to have a good reaction time. I was trying to get a good launch, and I didn't do well at that. But anyways, so I cut a 202, 203, 60 foot when you round up, and that's really bad. This bike, I should be able to cut a 165 or better 60 foot, but I didn't. And then that equated to a quarter mile ET of 1186 at 114.7, 115 mile an hour. For those that understand, your 60 foot is so important because it's harder to get anything moving from a dead stop, and the faster you can get it moving from a dead stop, the better your ET will be further down the line. So a 202 60 foot with my bike's power level and my riding ability equated to 1186 ET. If I would have cut a 1760 foot, that ET probably would have been somewhere around 1130s, 1140s ET at about the same mile per hour. I did a bunch of runs. The track was not crowded, and I did a bunch of runs. I did a bunch of hot laps. I think my first pass was a 1258 at 113.9 mile an hour, and my best pass was this 1186, and I had about 5 passes in the 11s. But what you'll notice is that the mile per hour doesn't vary. Whether you get out of the hole really clean or not, the mile per hour is really where you say, hey, the bike makes this power and it's going to produce a certain mile per hour. And so that's what you can use as your gauge when you go to the track and say, hey, I'm making good power because my mile per hour is good. My ET will come as I learn how to ride better, but my mile per hour is good. And so that's the concept you use. Now, with that being said, when I wrap up here, I'm going to move into the next part of the video, and the next part of the video is we're gonna put some meat on the bones in regards to time slips and dynos and those type of things. All right, now let's move on. All right, let's put a bow in this. This is about my third retake. Granddaughter's watching, my wife watched it, and they both said that I was getting angry in the video. So it's sort of not the intent on there. So a couple things on here. So this video here is for me personally is really cool because sort of a video journey. For those of you who's followed my Facebook page or seen some of my posts before I was doing any real videos, the gas was on there. It was my son's bike. I put on the dyno, and I think it was, like I said, 90 horsepower, 90 foot-pounds of torque, and then for pennies on the dollar, we built it to 124-ish horsepower and 120 foot-pounds of torque. So that's really cool to see that, and then along the way, the different exhaust testing, the intake testing, and all those things, and we kept making more and more and more power. So, and then you can sort of get to follow along with that. So I think that was really cool for me. That was the best part. The other thing I thought that like most of you guys do is once I got back from the track the other night, I went ahead and started pulling up and looking at dyno times track quarter mile times and drag strips and all those kind of things to sort of see what other Victory bikes are running. More importantly, what other steel frames were running, and I went back to drag times. And drag times actually has a page that's dedicated to Victories, and I think they have the top fastest 40 or 45 or so Victories that have published, that were posted. Now, with that said, many people didn't submit their time slips, so there's probably faster bikes out there. But I went in there and I was able to look. And then what was also cool was being able to sometimes have the build laid out, or I know the guy and I know what his build was. And to me, when I started looking at the mile per hour, again, like I said, mile per hour is the equalizer. Whether you're a great rider or an okay rider, your mile per hour will not change much given a similar altitude. Mile per hour is really effective horsepower, and then your ET is more rider skill, launching the bike, and those type of things. So to be able to see my mile per hour, in some cases beat, or some cases be very close to, 116 inch, 114 inch, 110 inch, 104 inch builds that were producing similar mile per hour, or sometimes less mile per hour than my cheap cast pistons eBay 100 cubic inch build that has, oh, by the way, has hauled a trailer for 4,000 miles, has been all across the southeast and north United States in its current configuration. So it's not like it's just like some thrown together junk that doesn't get ridden. I mean, it is a budget build, but it was built with quality stuff that had a lot of good life left in it. So I think that was really cool, and I enjoyed it. The other piece of that is, you know, the internet's the internet. I know, all people have different thoughts and opinions on, what it takes to make power. And, from my foxhole is I've always been, I've talked this before, I've always been a fan of getting the most out of your setup before you move to the next setup. Because what happens is, and I showed this a little bit on the 106 big bore comparison, is that when you optimize at a level, the next level is not nearly impressive. It's impressive, don't be wrong, but it's not nearly impressive. When you take a 106 with cams and then you put different cams, maybe a different exhaust, and a big bore, and your numbers jump up a lot. But when you optimize that build and then you make the next jump, then what you see is like, wow, that's not really, yeah, there's a big torque difference there, but horsepower wise, man, it's really not that big deal. So that's for me, that optimizing that piece of it. And so with that being said, that I think that trails into the next part of this on there. So optimizing. So I think I get the engine optimized, but there's some things I need to work on. One of them is the clutch release. The clutch release is very close to the grip, so there's like really no friction zone. It's like there and it's engaged. So I need to adjust on that. I think that will certainly help me be able to launch better. And the other thing is, going from third to fourth gear, I had a short shift. I had a shift between 55 and 5,800 RPMs, because if I shifted over 6, she would not shift from third and fourth. She would just stay in third gear. So I could shift pretty good RPM at first and second and third. But when it goes third and fourth, I had a short shift, and so there's more ET and more mile per hour that's available there too. A little bit more on the impact of elapsed time. But anyway, that being said, so there's some things that I optimize on the machine itself, and I have to optimize myself as a rider to get the most out of it. But I think this ties into the next piece. So now that the gasser, in my opinion, is that there's no more power left on the table under its current configuration out there. I could try a different set of cams. If I got the 495 cams, I could try a set of Andrews 460s. I could order custom cams, but right now with that setup, I don't think there's any more left in it. So the next step is heads. So I have a set of heads done by Star Racing a few years ago. I've talked about them in the past. They have 38 millimeter intake valves. And so the next step we're going to do is we're going to change heads. And we're going to do a head-only change onto the gasser. And we're going to see how much that changes horsepower. What does it do to mile per hour? We're going to take it back to track, and we're going to validate what just a head change is worth once the bike is optimized. I can't do it right away because I got a buddy of mine's bike down here. I'm doing a 116 in. So it'll be a little bit of time, but that's going to be a comparison, because I want to know, without the other deltas and variants in there, what is a good set of heads worth on there? I know Steve Lowry, shout out to Steve again. Steve did a head-only change on his Vision, and I think he picked up 17, 18 horsepower on heads only. I don't know if I'll get that or not, because I have a smaller engine, and the smaller engine doesn't have as much demand
airflow until you get higher in the RPM range. So we'll see. But anyways, I think this stuff is really cool. I appreciate it. And thank you.